Welcome to Climify, the podcast that connects climate scientists and design educators together so that we can help combat our climate crisis in our classrooms. The discussions on this program are geared to help you climify your syllabi to assign projects that not only teach design fundamentals, but also can have a positive impact on our climate.
This episode is brought to you by Renourish. Renourish is your one-stop online resource for sustainable design and systems thinking strategies and tools for the graphic designer. You can learn more about Renourish on their website at re-nourish.org, or you can follow them on Twitter and Facebook at Renourish.
Welcome to Climify. I'm Eric Benson, and I'll be your host this season as we talk to climate experts from all over the world to help us design educators fight the climate crisis in our classrooms. And yes, I'm also a design educator. I've been teaching for 15 years here at the University of Illinois. But even if you're not a design educator listening to this show, there's so much useful information jam-packed in each that you too can learn how to do your part to help reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. On this episode of Climify, I'm joined by Lisa Zimmermann. Lisa Zimmermann is a German-Irish design researcher and educator specializing in climifying the profession of the communication designer. She currently lectures at a broad range of students in the design faculty at Griffith College in Dublin, Ireland. She specializes in the areas of web design, typography, communication design, and digital tools and software. But rather than just integrating sustainability principles into the existing modules she teaches, she's developing a certificate in sustainable communication design program aimed at professionals. You can also find Lisa as host of Conscious Communication Design Podcast, which is available on all regular podcast platforms. You can also learn more about Lisa on her website, lisazimmermann.com. That's LISAZIMMERMANN.com. And on Twitter and Instagram at CCD by Lisa. Well, it's wonderful to have you here, Lisa. We're excited that you're in Ireland, and we're excited that you, despite the time zone difference, found the time in the day to talk with us here on Climify. So I just wanted to get things off by letting everyone know who you are and getting the basics of what you do and where do you do it.
Thanks, Eric, and thanks for having me. I think if I have to describe what I do or who I am, I usually say I'm a design researcher and also educator. Mm-hmm. So my background is in communication design, and I specialize in sustainable graphic and web design, which I kind of call conscious communication design for myself. But that's due to like terminology mostly.
You have to trademark that, right?
Yeah, well, see, it's mostly due to sustainability having that like ambiguity with, often being interpreted as like a business term. And then I don't really like the term graphic design either, because hardly anyone really works as just a graphic designer anymore. It's kind of like it's the old term for a profession that doesn't really exist anymore. Like nowadays, you're not just a graphic designer, you also UX or web designer or whatnot. That's why I prefer communication design as a term. But then in the end, when it comes to sustainable graphic design, mm-hmm. This is kind of like a coined term that we can find online when we're looking for, the thing that we do, like you and I. So that's kind of why I need that term. And whenever I write or publish something online, I would always use, sustainable graphic design. But I'm kind of trying to add web design to that as well. So sustainable web design. It's kind of like another niche area, but there's more and more written about it as well. And I find it's very important for us as well to consider the website of things, because most graphic or communication designers are doing web-based products as well.
And there's probably a lot of people, and I was in this category when I first was doing more UI UX work, where I felt a lot better when I was doing it because I wasn't making these things that then, were, headed probably to the landfill. But there's a lot
Yeah.
of environmental impact with things that you make that are hosted online.
Exactly. And we need to consider their impact as well. Um, there's something I heard recently is if you have very little impact, or the product that you're producing or designing has very little impact, its impact almost gets like accelerated by but let's say an email, for example, it's very low in file size. It's a couple of kilobytes, so it's seemingly unimportant if you think about storing an email, sending an email, keeping it in your inbox, not deleting it. But then of course this adds up, and because we're not considering it as much, because it's such a little impact.
Right.
But that's why it's so dangerous, really.
Because how many billions of people are doing that, right? Just saying, not deleting the email.
And especially this year, I find with everything that we do online, all the, like, for example, my lectures are being recorded online, whether I'm doing them in person or not. They have to be like recorded and stored in a cloud. But I just kept thinking, God, it's like hundreds of hours of me talking in an online cloud. And I haven't been warned by the system so far that any of those recordings have been deleted. So that must be hundreds of gigabytes at this stage of my online recordings. And it's not just me. So yeah, it does make you, it's...
Yeah, what's the climate footprint of all the Zoom classes we've been teaching, right?
Exactly, yeah. It's a tremendous amount of data that needs to be stored. Yeah.
So I'm wondering then, most folks that I've met that are doing what we're doing, social and environmental justice in the design world, or even outside of the design world, have had some sort of like epiphany or something happen to them that caused them to get involved. So I'm interested in how you got involved in sustainable design and sustainable design education.
Yeah, I love that question. I'm sure you get some really interesting responses from other people there as well, because it's something that is in the end quite personal. I think whoever focuses on sustainability probably does it out of, for personal reasons mostly, for most people, I'd say. I think I've always been very good at questioning everything myself. Yeah, even when I was a kid, questioning, and not necessarily answering, but questioning was I'm very good at that. But myself, my own morals and beliefs, but also my surroundings. So I became vegetarian. I was 10 years old, for example, and then later on vegan then. But I think this kind of like questioning nature has always been like on my mind. And then I realized, I think the aha kind of moment must have been at the end of my undergrad studies as in communication design, when I did my first internship. I did the internship as a copywriter, actually, in a pretty standard ad agency type setup, and realized in just the 3-month internship, I mean, it had kind of dawned on me before that I might have actual issues working for certain clients, but this is where I realized, okay, I can't actually do this job that I was made to do, really. Like, I dreamed all my life to be a graphic designer. It was like my big passion to design and to advertise as well. I love advertising as a thing itself. Communicating ideas and solving problems, that's my greatest passion. But I realized, I can't work for most clients, really, because I wouldn't agree with what they produce or how they produce it. And even in the 3-month internship, half of the projects that I had to do, I struggled myself with even doing those. So basically, I was at the end of my my undergrad, my education, and I realized I can't actually execute this job that I was dreaming to do.
Really lost at that point.
Sorry?
You probably felt really lost at that point.
Yeah, did you have the same kind of experience?
I mean, yeah, I would say so. I did work in a number of different places where I just was like, like you, where I just had a lot of ethical concerns about what was going on with what I was making, and I did work in some advertising for a while, and then it was completely inappropriate stuff, and it wasn't even environmentally related. It was just body image type, and let's Photoshop this and get rid of that, and it's
Yeah.
I just had some issues with all of that stuff. So I definitely
And I don't, yeah, but I see you probably had the same experience that in my education anyways, I don't remember having talked about that in classes,
I never
like
did.
we had a module which was very progressive really. It was called Green Design, great lecture. We talked about it's kind of just touching though on the surface of creating more like he was introducing us to projects where they use like sustainable kind of biodegradable packaging or something like that. In the end, I still think like it was progressive and it was great. Loved it, but it was very much just touching on the surface. I don't remember in any time during my education having really had this like debates about what should we be doing as designers, and what should we maybe refuse to do as well, should we question. And I think kind of I try to introduce that at any point when I think my students should be questioning something, I kind of like encourage them to. So when I do some of my modules are I'm teaching Photoshop skills to not just communication designers, but to fashion and interior designers as well. So they're like first years and they're getting like an intro to Photoshop, Illustrator, and design from me. And whenever I do a class on like photo retouching, the fashion designers are obviously, oh my God, this is amazing. So cool. I can, liquefy filter and squeeze in like, those cheeks and make people skinny. And but yeah, I try to like, introduce the thought of having them decide what is ethical to do with a person's image, very, very interesting to have them. I mean, I don't really have the room to really have like a proper, conversation about it, but I find that through practice, I can still encourage them to make up their own mind of what's right and what's wrong.
So you were out of school in an internship for 3 months and in advertising, your dream job, realized it was not what you thought it was, and very shaken and stirred by it. What did you do after that then? Like, how did you get into where you are now teaching? Like, obviously you went back to school at some point, but where did you say, I need to get involved in, environmental or social justice issues with my work?
Yeah. I had decided after my undergrad studies, thankfully, to do a master's. And that's when I moved back to Ireland really as well. I'm originally from Germany. So I did my undergrads in Berlin, and then moved on to doing a master's in design practice. So very general really. And I hadn't really thought about, what I was gonna do in that master's yet. But moving to Ireland then, it was a very, very loosely defined master's. I started it. They weren't like giving us too many like directions. We were very open in like what we were gonna like write about.
Yeah.
And I focused on sustainable graphic design and figured for myself, because I knew the agency landscape in Germany roughly from studying and internships and blah blah blah. But I didn't really know the landscape in Ireland yet. So I figured this is going to give me a good opportunity to learn, to get to know agencies, potential employers, but also what sustainable graphic design is like in Ireland. So that's what I wrote my first thesis on. It's called Sustainable Graphic Design in Practice. Blah blah blah. But I was like looking at the overall landscape. So I interviewed Irish graphic designers or people like working in that field on their views. I kind of like tapped onto into their beliefs and their practices really, and realized it's not really a thing yet. That was 2015. So we have a little bit more going on now, but it's not that much, and definitely it's not reached education yet. So we don't have any modules or courses in that area yet.
That's a bummer.
Yeah, it is. But even after that thesis, then I had, discovered this niche area for myself, and I figured, okay, cool. So this is what I'm about. This is what I researched. I know more about, the practice side of things, but I didn't know what to do. I didn't really want to work freelance. I didn't really want to work for an agency. So I've been like pottering around, and I didn't feel confident enough. I'm like one of those typical cases of people who have like a great idea but don't feel confident enough to actually go for it.
Yeah.
So I did another master's then in environmental sciences.
So you have 2 masters now.
I'm doing my 3rd one right now, actually.
You should feel very confident then with all those master's degrees now.
It took me the 3 now to actually, start going. I know it's ridiculous. Yeah.
No, it's not. I feel the same way. I feel the same way about a lot of stuff that I do. And once you put it out there, you automatically say, oh, shoot, why did I do this?
I just wish for other people that they can, kickstart it a bit earlier when they have a great idea, because I wasn't ready for it. I always thought, I don't know the Irish market well enough. I haven't really worked as a graphic designer much except for freelance work. So I didn't really know the agency life, and I still don't really. And that's why I didn't feel confident enough to engage with designers to say, hey, this is, what we should be doing. Because I always felt like, well, I'm not from this country, and I'm not, I'm not actually like working as a graphic designer either. So who am I to tell you what to do? But I have to like just finally overcome this. So yeah, then the master's in environmental sciences, I did some research on on paper actually, which was really fascinating. So I looked at paper sizing recipes. So paper sizing is the method of treating pulp or like paper, in order to make it printable. So that there's like chemicals involved in that, and I looked at those and thought that was like fascinating. Which also made me realize, though, one of the big issues is a lack of collaboration between industries.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how? I think in interior design, fashion design, sustainability is or in other areas of design, really, sustainability is ingrained in the whole process. There's like certifications and labels and stuff like that. We don't really have that for graphic or communication design, not yet. No, not yet, not really. And I find it's also because there's been this eternal miscommunication between designers and printers, for example, who have always like not liked each other and don't really like to talk about stuff. But talking about print processes and how to set up documents properly to avoid paper waste.
These are these like little fundamental but overlooked things that you don't learn in design school. I had to learn on the job, and I did get yelled at by a printer, and in one of my first jobs, I sent over a Pantone color and didn't tell him about it, and that cost a huge
Ooh.
I didn't learn any of that stuff in school. But.
Yeah. The printers always hate us, and I have full understanding for it. Because no one teaches you properly in how to set up your documents.
There's so much to teach. That's one of the things.
Yes. Yeah.
There's so much.
But it also has to be it has to be a constant learning curve as well.
Oh yeah.
Like we have to just collaborate better. And then the same goes with paper technology. I find that the printers usually don't know anything about the paper that they're using, and what's involved in the process, or when is my paper, like how much can I print on it and do with it until it becomes like not recyclable anymore. Like that's stuff that, we still have to learn about.
And I work with paper too, and I ask students, where does your paper come from? And they have trees, they know that much. But where in the world does it happen? And especially in North America, it's a couple places, and it might be the same in in Ireland? Where does all the paper come from in Ireland? That's a good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. Well, all our paper really comes from abroad. I don't think I didn't find any paper manufacturer in Ireland in my past research. But yeah, that is a good point, and that's what is so interesting in Ireland as well. That we are a small island. Obviously, everything has to be imported. So when you're looking at using sustainable graphic design, books, resources, most of them are written in the States, some maybe in Europe, but then half of that isn't really usable for us here in Ireland because you kind of have to consider the whole life cycle of the product. And if I'm using recycled paper, but that comes from further than FSC certified paper that's from closer, comes from the UK. And now with Brexit, it's all like total mayhem anyways. But because we don't, we have to figure out where our stuff comes from. But
that's another podcast right there, right?
I kind of was wondering about this stuff when thinking of, choosing sustainable printers, which is often mentioned as one go-to kind of method for sustainable graphic design. Pick your one good printer, eco-friendly printer that prints with soy inks and uses recycled papers or certified papers. And I couldn't find any in Ireland. So
wow.
What do I, but I found one now, but I still wonder, what do I even recommend? If I do a talk or if I have a conversation with either students or designers, do I say choose a sustainable printer, but then that would be in the UK, so you would have to get that shipped over here, which wouldn't be very sustainable. Or do you talk to your local printer and see what you can do with them? And it might be not soy-based inks, but at least you can work with, the process or the papers. Yeah, I don't know. This is all, it's very difficult to make those decisions.
Yeah. And you've mentioned sustainable graphic design many times, or sustainable design. And I'm curious, since you're working on your third master's now, how do you define it? And are we getting close to it yet?
Great question. Yeah. I define it for myself, sustainable design in general, as looking at the whole life cycle of a product or service, of anything that we produce, and looking at each individual step and trying to optimize it. So each individual step within that life cycle, how can we optimize it? How can we reduce the environmental footprint of every single thing that's involved? So that's kind of why we can't ever reach, sustainability. I mean, it's always about the reduction of the impact, because we're always going to have an impact.
Right.
So even if I manage to produce something that is not being downcycled, but actually, doesn't lose in value when it's staying in the cycle, basically, even then I'm using resources. And we're talking a lot about carbon neutrality. Neutrality, is that word? Being good. Carbon neutral, being carbon neutral. Sure. Which for a lot of company means offsetting. And then does that actually mean being neutral? Not really.
Not really. No.
To me, it's like I'm still sinning, and then I go to confession, and to say it in traditional Irish Catholic terms.
Comparison. That's a good comparison.
Right? It's so you sin, then you confess, and then you're forgiven, and okay. So that's kind of what, I don't know, to me that's what offsetting means in the end. I mean, of course, it's better than not doing anything, but is that solving the issue? So we're always having an impact, but we need to work on reducing that. So we can't ever have the perfect sustainable product, whether that's a service or, in communication design terms, it would be like a web or print product most of the time, or any tool of communication, really.
Let's take a quick break and come back after these commercial messages.
Where do young designers see themselves at the intersection of climate change and innovation, and how can we teach that intersection in the classroom? Designers are problem solvers, capable of imagining solutions for a more sustainable future. We have a bigger role to play in all phases of the design process, not just the beginning. My name is Rachel Cifarelli, graphic designer, recent college grad, and part of the Climate Designers EDU team. And after graduating, I realized today's classrooms tend to skip over that universal side of design. So if you're a design educator, I want to hear from your students. Help set in motion the first ever project that centers students at the intersection of design education and climate change. I want to know what your students think about sustainable design, how they see climate change impacting their future careers, and what even comes to mind when they hear the term climate design. Send your students to climatedesigners.org/edu/newwave-survey to take the 5-question survey or sign up for an interview with me. Help me inform a new wave of design education, one that teaches every designer how to be a climate designer.
Most of us know what we need to do to help the planet, like more solar, trees, and more bicycles. But even the best of us can get pretty stuck with figuring out how we motivate and inspire millions of people and governments around the world to adopt change. But there is a way. My name is Katie Patrick. I'm an environmental engineer, a designer, and an author, and I interview expert PhD researchers from top universities around the world like MIT, Harvard, and Stanford about the psychology of environmental action. And I put these interviews out on my podcast called How to Save the World. I'm inviting you to join me on this wild intellectual journey into the heart of the environmental psyche so that we can unearth these fascinating and critical teachings we can use in our climate campaigns, programs, designs, and startups. You can find my podcast, How to Save the World, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, and at anchor.fm/Katie Patrick.
I wonder then, that because I know when I was involved with finding out about sustainable design, and maybe you as well, I looked at it as like, okay, we need to do this. This makes sense, and we need to minimize our impact. And now I'm a design educator, I'm older, and you are too. And there's this thing called the climate crisis. And that for me really jump-started I need to do more. Right. There's a clock that's ticking. And so I'm wondering for you, like you're a design educator, you're a designer. What do you think designers and design educators can do best to help fight the climate crisis, draw down those emissions?
I think every single person on the planet has to be aware of their responsibilities, but a designer, a graphic designer specifically, should be aware of theirs because we have a lot of influence. Like our job is literally to influence consumer behavior. That is kind of, what we do. So we need to be really aware of that responsibility and whatever we do with that responsibility. So we have to ask ourselves, what is ethical and what isn't, and when it comes to what isn't, what can I do about it? I think that's kind of the main thing. As an educator, I'm trying to have my students be aware of that, of the influence that they're having, that the impact that their job is going to have, so that they can build their own ethical framework. Hopefully that's kind of, I think, the ultimate goal, that students learn to decide for themselves what's right and what's wrong. And I do have a bit of hope there that I find the new Generation Z that's coming up there, the Friday for Future guys, they're amazing in that they're, raising their voices about stuff that we've all been, screwing up for them. And I think I have high hopes that they're going to be a generation that enters the workforce saying, I'm not going to do that, like as in, you're giving me a task and I'm not agreeing with it and I'm just saying no. I think so far we've all been, I think with Generation Y is kind of like started to question this a little bit, you know, and like started wanting to have like a different work-life balance and questioning work hours and work ethics. But I'm hoping that with, you know, that we're getting to a stage where we're all questioning whether what we do for a living is like the right thing to do, and not just what we do for a living as a job itself. We all need to do our jobs, like, but in practice, I think that means also saying no to a client or educating them, and that's kind of part of sustainable design. I think that if a client is completely disagreeing in principle with my beliefs, I might be better off saying, no, I'm not going to work with them. I'd rather focus on someone else. And I know that's a very bold statement. I used to be very wary of saying this, but thankfully there's more sustainable designers popping up now that are saying the same thing, that we need to, you know, make selections as well with who we work with. And even if we don't want to do that, or, you know, we see potential with the client in maybe shaping the way we can communicate for and with them, that maybe we can, you know, like I don't have to like choose, if I work as a designer or in an agency, I don't necessarily have to say, okay, I'm only working with, you know, XYZ clients now, which would be very limiting. But maybe with some, I could say, okay, do you know, the idea for this ad campaign is not really, you know, what we should be doing. Or if you have like any concerns, maybe raise them and just say, you know, it's not the right thing to do. So steering them into the better correct direction, if that makes sense.
You're going to have to know a lot before you get there, right? Which,
yes.
You know, well, that's our job as educators, right? To help them, our students, get there. How do you help your students? I think it's kind of a two-part question for me, because I think there's a couple of components here. I think the first part is like, how do you get your students to that information, right? As an educator, I know you said there's not a class in Ireland about this, but you can kind of do that in other ways. And also too, I think a lot of us as educators have experienced, you know, the Gen Z and all the stuff that they're going through. How do you get them from a mental health and perspective to not just be apathetic and sit back and you know, not do anything, you know? So that's why I think it's a two-part question. You know, get them the information, and how do you handle like the mental health side of it?
Yeah, that's a good one. It is really tough. I've been doing like a really heavy loaded kind of project with my very small communication design class last year, and had some of them really struggle with, like, they were able to decide themselves in the project which ethical dilemma they wanted to tackle, basically. So they chose, all of the topics were very heavy, from like mental health to voter suppression, to violence against women. So they all had like very like heavy topics, and some of them got like personally, very, very personally involved, and you could see them like getting worse state every week. You know, it was difficult. Yeah. So it is a very important question. That's true. I think so. Going back to the first part of your question, really giving them the information. It's definitely something that I'm like in. There's two sides to it. I think you can, like, all of us that are involved in this, trying to make our profession more sustainable, or, you know, reducing our environmental footprint or raising awareness. We can create communication ourselves, or create, you know, work on the curriculum and include it that way. So I'm working on my own course right now, a certificate course in sustainable graphic and web design, that I'm looking to propose to colleges That would be aimed at professionals though, so as an add-on after, either having worked in industry already or directly after their undergrads. So, designing an own course could be a way to go, but also, we can use our besides our regular teaching, any other means of communication. I've seen the most sustainable graphic design courses that I've seen pop up were like privately organized. So there's Little Fox Design in Canada, there's a Domestika course, there's a LinkedIn course in sustainable design, and then I think there's one Australian one. So they're all like privately organized, so not through an higher education institution.
What's going on with that?
I don't know, but it's still like it's a trend, definitely, I think, and they might be easier to consume. Most of those are like, overall, it's like video footage of like 2 to 3 hours. So maybe that's, easier, more palatable to people, easier to digest. You don't have to commit to like a whole certificate course or something.
Yeah, well, I also think it's back to what you were saying a little earlier, is that you have to teach these students so many things on an undergrad level with printers and basic fundamentals and then advanced techniques, is that you run out of time, right? And I see a lot of sustainable design courses in the grad level more so, and maybe that's one of the reasons why, or not enough people can teach it. Not enough people can teach it.
True. Yes, there's not enough people that can teach it. That's for sure. And it takes a long time to change the curriculum of an existing course, an undergrad course, isn't it?
A lot of red tape. I went through this, and it took like, I can't even tell you how many years, like 3 years.
Oh wow, amazing! But you actually managed to change the curriculum of your undergrad course.
Yeah,
and
it took all the people who taught there to do it.
Amazing. That's fantastic.
It's a great success story, but
that is a huge accomplishment.
I don't hear enough of those success stories. That's the problem.
Yeah. So in the college where I currently teach, the communication design course, it's like a 3-year course, and it's very new still. So it's also for me, is it like a relatively new, like I'm in my 3rd year of teaching now, still relatively new to teaching, where do I start like integrating those? But I have been asked to like, look over existing modules, and I can integrate stuff. So I'm teaching the typography module, for example. So integrating concerns around accessibility and diversity into the curriculum wherever I can. I would, drop those things in. So when I get a chance to revise modules, like giving my input there. And even if you can't, as an educator, if you don't get the chance to modify that, you can still, in existing projects, you can write your briefs specifically so they include, something. So if I have them do a product design, I would use, specifically brands that already, are in that area, or making something more sustainable. But I find it even more important because I noticed, I think, in their first year with my students, I did a lot of like, they kind of figured out very early on that was kind of my direction. They had to do like a recycling bin label project, for example. And sometimes it felt a bit like they're doing it for me, or they're doing it just because, well, it's how I chose the brief. But I try to kind of sprinkle it in with regular briefs as well. And kind of make them question their own thoughts or medium as well. So if we're saying, good communication would generally be more sustainable, like it does go hand in hand very often. Like even if you advertise for your local takeaway, with printing out brochures and distributing them to thousands of or hundreds of households, would that be the best means of communication, or would online ads be more successful. Like always considering, which medium would be the best platform so that we're not wasting resource. And it's not really print versus web. It is an overall consideration of what's the best means of communication.
Yeah, for sure. I think your advice to educators who don't have the sustainable design class, but want to sprinkle it in, as you said, is perfect. I experienced that when I first started teaching too. I called it, I wanted to give the students the soup, but I couldn't give them the soup, so I had to put vegetables in all their little classes. So they got it all.
It's a nice metaphor, yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned a few times that you are frustrated about the lack of classes, especially in Ireland, especially in your school. So I'm giving you the opportunity here. You're creating a dream design course. Maybe it's a project, curriculum, however you want to frame it, on sustainable design, on the planet and the climate crisis. What would you create? What would it be? I mean, it could be as big as, don't worry about money, don't worry about bureaucracy. But what would you want to create?
Yeah, it's a difficult question. When I tried to prepare for this course, I thought about it, especially because I am currently creating a course myself. So it made me wonder, is this my dream course? I mean, it should be, obviously, but it's also considerations of, what's feasible and what makes sense. And I still have to figure that out mostly really. Is my market even there, So what I'm currently designing is a certificate course in sustainable graphic and web design. I'm envisioning a 3-module certificate. So we would have one module for general business practice, one based around printing, and one based around web products or web design. And this would be aimed at professionals. But of course, when we talk about, changing the curriculum for undergrad courses, that's really what it should be like. Ultimately, there shouldn't be a need for a certificate course like the one I'm designing right now, because it should be part of all of the undergrad courses already.
Yes.
But we need to get there somehow. There's only very, very few people in Ireland that I know that are, even concern themselves with sustainable graphic design. Very few people. So we wouldn't even have the educators for a course really. So we need to educate all of us, right. I suppose. But it's difficult, isn't it? I don't know how you do it. How do you talk if you're in the street and you meet your box standard, I don't know, sounds awful now, but a regular graphic designer.
Yeah.
How do you tell them what you do or focus on without sounding demeaning or, they are doing something wrong?
Oh gosh. So you're flipping the table here. Okay.
Sorry.
No, it's
because
fine.
I don't have, that's what I mean. I'm good at asking questions, not so good at answering.
All right. That's a great question. I'm even terrible at explaining before I was doing this, what I did as a designer. I remember telling people I'm a designer. I do, graphic design, or I do digital work, and they would always ask if I was a fashion designer or, I'm furniture. And so when I get into that point, I'm talking to other graphic designers about it, I do feel, like you said, like I'm talking down. And I don't like that feeling, because it makes me, I'm sort of elevating what I do, why haven't you guys thought about this? Why are you still creating? And
right.
So the few times where I have been asked that question, let me think. I think I was just sort of saying to them, I really consider, the environmental and social impacts of the things that I make. It really is concerning to me. And I usually don't get many follow-up questions after that. So I don't know if it was good or they just were I don't know what she means and I don't really want to talk about it anymore. But that's a really good question. How about, do you have a better answer than that? I hope you do, because mine seems...
Not really, but I think that's what's been holding me back the whole time in like getting out there and getting my knowledge out there. Is that I didn't feel confident enough to stand there and like teach people who are doing their job for God knows how long, longer than me anyways, because I didn't really practice it that much, and telling them what to do. That can't really be the answer. But I think I'm getting there now because I realize it has to be a conversation. It always has to remain a conversation and an iteration process anyways. So I can only get more knowledgeable on how to approach them if I start talking to them. And I have to start doing workshops with people and maybe calling them workshops rather than talks or presentations, so that it becomes clear that it's a two-way thing. You know, it's not me telling them what to do, but rather me questioning with them on how we can do it better.
Well, you do ask good questions, so that would be
thank you.
Strategy.
But I think that's kind of all I can recommend as well, is like constantly asking ourselves, like, is it right what I'm doing, or is there a better way of doing it? And that's all we can do, really. There's never a good or perfect answer or solution to anything.
No. I mean, I think the first two people I interviewed on this podcast were climate scientists, and the question to them was, what can we do to stop our climate crisis? And their number one answer was, you got to talk about it. Both of them said this: you need to talk about it and then reflect upon it, right? And so that's where that's the two-way dialogue you're talking about. It's not just you lecture like empty vessels and they learn everything from you. It's a back and forth.
Yeah, that's very true.
So we're coming up on time here. I wanted to give you a moment to, since most of our audiences are design educators, as a design educator yourself, what kind of advice would you give to another design educator, or just in general, if they're interested in this topic? How should they get started on it, and how can they learn more so that we can change this issue of all these, non-sustainable design classes, or it just has a bedrock foundation of what we do in design?
Yeah.
That's a big question. I'm sorry. That was much bigger than I thought it was. How do we change the world, Lisa? Please give us the answer.
Let's start. So number one, okay. I think the most important thing is that we are aware of our responsibility as educators, which is a big one and can be very frustrating to think about because it's a massive responsibility. But in the same way, making our students aware of the responsibility they hold. Like, they're not, okay, it sounds silly when I say that now, but it's not like they're not just learning a profession. Like, it's more like they're going to be communicators, and they need to decide on what they want to communicate, and figure out for themselves, what's important to them and what isn't. So I think, making them aware of their responsibility, that's the one thing. And that's what we can do like every single day in every class, pointing out why something is important. That's part of teaching anyways. But why they should care, I suppose, about certain issues and how it ties in with their future job. That's probably, that's one thing. Yeah. And apart from that, whether my colleagues that are listening to this are designing their own courses, which would be great, whether they are integrating it into the existing curriculum by maybe focusing the next brief on something in that direction, or even phrasing the brief so that students have to ask themselves certain questions. That can be one thing. Even if you work with existing briefs, you can focus your attention towards a questioning kind of inquiry, which is, part of problem solving anyways. But directing them, I suppose, into sustainable or environmental considerations. And apart from that, we need to all kind of organize ourselves a bit better. I think the Climate Designers platform is a really good start. I kind of hate that there isn't really enough people in Europe joined up there yet. So if there's any Europeans listening to this, please join the Climate Designers, because that's what we need. Not necessarily this one platform, but it's one of what we can use social media, we can use whatever, but we need to connect all design educators. We need to connect, and not just in the standard kind of conference national level, but internationally. Because we can learn from each other on how we can change how design is being taught. Like, we're on a massive kind of curveball right now on how design is changing, especially communication design, changing so much because there's more that's being asked of us, of the profession, of the job, than a couple of decades ago. Like, it's constantly evolving, and sustainability has to be part of this. Mm-hmm. So we need to figure out how we can integrate it, and maybe figure out how we can change the curriculum in general a little bit quicker. I'm still very new to the education system, but it is a bit frustrating when you're used to, I don't know, even working in corporations, where policies can be changed quite quickly, actually. Right. No, but then you enter the education sector and you're like, oh yes, this is the norm for the next 4 or 5 years, and then we can like kind of talk about it, and it's it's very frustrating.
I laugh when I'm crying inside when I
yeah, and I still have to like figure out how all of that works. But I would wish that we would do more, like even within my college, or that there would be like more roundtable discussions on how we can change things, and keep them up to date.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. We need that stronger community, and things that I learned about teaching sustainable design were not just my ideas. They were ones that I taught and learned with other people. Like, it's the way that we build it up. It's not one person doing it all. It's not a hero's game here, where we all need to be individual heroes, every day.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
Well, Lisa, thanks so much for
Thank you, Eric. This was a great conversation.
It was, and it felt like I could go on a little bit longer, but trying to keep it to 45 minutes. But definitely thank you so much, and it was great having you.
Thank you, Eric. It was fantastic to talk to you.
Thanks for tuning in today to Climify, but don't leave just yet. I've got more goodness for you coming up. Music. As the pandemic has really affected our friends in the performing arts, where they're unable to book shows, tour, or sometimes even get into a recording studio, I thought I'd highlight one at the end of each of our episodes. Since this is a podcast for designers, the musicians featured on each are also designers. Well, I'll turn it over to our first artist to explain who they are and the reasons behind their music.
Hello, my name is Kurt Bielema, and I work as an art director for Illinois Public Media, a dual licensee PBS NPR station located at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. My song is from my first release, Typeset, and it's called Passing Phase. It's a song about making mistakes, understanding change, living the drama, and making amends. Relationship stuff. I have a new album coming out next month called Space. It hits a little harder with songs about life and death, society, and of course, relationship stuff. I remember you. You're living it up now, one crazy summer. And I'd say anything to soothe the blues. You know that I'll call you up, even if it's dangerous. When one day we make things true, you know that I'll care about us. When the point is made and it goes against the grain, all in for the passion play, and I won't back down. No, I won't calm down. Yesterday was strange, but small sometimes have changed, but it's only past today. The swing of my head anytime I move. You miss me in bed, so I took off my shoes. I said anything to stay right here with you. You know that I'll call you up, even if it's dangerous. When one day we make things true, you know that I'll care about. When the point is made and it goes against the grain, all in for the passion play. I won't back down. No, I won't calm down. Yesterday is strange, once more sometimes have changed, but it's all in past way. Broken glass we save for to use again one day, but for now it's past and fades. Yesterday was strange, what's more so the times have changed, all in for the past and fades.
Thanks for listening to Climify. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. To catch all the latest on Climify, you can follow us on Instagram at Climify Podcast. Climify is part of Climate Designers. Learn more at climatedesigners.org/edu.